Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen. Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you weren't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, forget it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you can live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Okay. Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. This is your guy, Marcellus Ease. And of course, you already know we got some excellent stuff on the docket for today. A lot of storylines to get into. The NBA is always shaking up as usual. The Knicks owner, James Dolan, who normally loves paying the luxury tax, kind of sent out a warning to the rest of the league, especially the fan bases, letting it be known that, hey, these owners in the league today are not necessarily in a position to maintain championship teams. And we're going to elaborate more on that, as we'll also hear from Mark Cuban talk about the new infrastructure for the NBA business heading into streaming. It's no longer a cat and mouse game when it comes to ratings. Also, we're going to hear from Ice Trae, aka Mr. Young, as he feels this is the most slept on he's ever been in his whole basketball life. We're also going to get some great insight on his exit from Atlanta. And speaking of exits, or should I say possible exit, we're going to get into a multi-layered bag when we discuss the different dynamics playing out with Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics. Ooh, he's put in work this past season, being the leader of a team that really had no expectations, but yet they got to 56 wins. Once again, it's going to be a deep dive going from Brad Stevens and the way he has a sort of lack of EQ when it comes to reading the room with Jaylen Brown and his first interactions being drafted into the Boston building, his name always being on the trade block for certain players, and also them trying to control his voice at the same time. We definitely going to get into it because Jaylen Brown even lets it be known about his real sentiments, feeling sort of neglected and not being valued by the Boston Celtics. Last but not least, we're going to get some great insight on what's going on within the Spurs organization, especially with Victor Wembanyama and Tim Duncan. We got a second confirmation on their relationship not quite being on the same page. So us as the viewing NBA audience is slowly watching this league shift and pivot as NBA owners who were once comfortable going over the luxury tax are now peeling back because of the second apron rules. And in this segment right here, we're going to continue to take you off your daily algorithms and get into some more nuanced topics, as we'll hear Mark Cuban elaborate on the league's new business model and also how a lot of these new owners who are using private equity and Saudi money to buy these teams, their relationship with the franchise is going to be a lot different. Long gone are the days of the Dr. Bus and the Lakers setting the standard of just winning year in, year out. Same thing for the Boston Celtics. They do have that championship aura as an NBA legacy franchise, but it's not a guarantee with the way the new owner came in just using private equity money. We're seeing Luka in his prime years arrive in LA, but there's no rush to put a real championship team around him. It's almost as if the vision of the owner just wanting to win a championship year in, year out may eventually just become a relic. But to start this off, and this right here serves as a nice backdrop, listen to the Knicks owner, James Dolan, after winning a championship. And keep in mind, this is an owner who has always been comfortable with just dipping into the luxury tax. But even he lets it be known that he's not willing to go there. This shows you how much the league has changed structurally. And make no mistake about it, it will affect development among young players, star players as they age into their mid-20s now. They're getting disposed a lot quicker. Fans are about to see a more NFL-style model be introduced into the NBA. And what I mean by that, of course, for those of you who watch the NFL, you already know there's nobody bigger than the program. Any superstar that sort of acts up, is too expensive, is always injured, they're quick to not only be cast-offs, but also most other teams do not show interest. We can tie these things into the NBA this season There was no interest for Trae Young, LaMelo Ball when they hit the trade block, and also Anthony Davis. But this is only the beginning. We got Jimmy Butler almost holding out during the regular season in his last year in Miami. Keep that in mind. But once again, that NFL style model is slowly creeping into the NBA. But let's listen to James Dolan as he elaborates, not wanting to go over the second apron.
So based on individual contracts, that while the core will be the core, do you think there's a chance that we have 2, 3, 4 player turnover or no?
First off, most of our guys are on a contract.
Right.
We have a couple guys who are not. If we could bring back the whole team, right, exactly as it is, I think why wouldn't you, right? But I don't know if we're going to be able to.
Just contractually.
Right. Just contractually.
And some guys
right.
are going to get bigger paydays, and good for them.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're willing to stretch, right? But there's certain things in the NBA that you have to be, suicidal to do, and we're not going to do those.
Right.
One of them is called the second apron. Cannot go into the second apron.
Got it.
But it's. But that's up to Leon, right?
He's making all the decisions. You're just stroking checks, right?
Yeah, I'm just telling him how big of a check I can write, right? I'll write as big of a check as possible, but I can't write a check that goes into the second apron.
Got it.
Now, once again, this serves as a nice backdrop as you hear an owner who has always been comfortable going over the luxury tax, and that's because the local TV market for New York has been very lucrative for James Dolan. But now, because of this new media landscape, things have changed. Look at the words he used. Going over the second apron is suicidal. The league today, the way it's structurally set up, if you actually dip into the apron one time, you could end up being stuck there over and over. And the reason is because if you give the wrong star a crazy contract and all of a sudden they become unavailable, it's almost a death sentence because that star is completely untradeable. A prime example of this is Trae Young. Look how he went to the Washington Wizards basically for free. Anthony Davis also hit the trade block. There was very little suitors. Same thing for another player who's also very injury prone in Ja Morant. So now we're going to hear from Mark Cuban elaborate on how the business has changed. And he gives great insight to the relationship these new owners are having with their teams, especially coming in with a lot of private equity and Saudi money. I'm gonna point out once again that Saudi money, especially from the new Lakers owner, is eventually over time gonna have fans realize, hey, Luka's been here for 2 or 3 seasons. Why they're not in a rush to put some championship pieces around him? Again, things are shifting, and Mark Cuban also elaborates on the true business model the NBA is in under streaming. And it's not ratings, but you guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
I can't afford an NFL team, and I wouldn't want to do it where, you bring in 50 different, it's kind of like my buddy, well, I don't want to name names, but when you bring in a lot of private equity, when the Mavs, I used to always say that, okay, I'll absorb the losses because winning was more important. But when you have a bunch of investors, you can't do that. It's not all your money. Steve Ballmer can do it. Right? The Pacers can do it however they want to do it. But if you have investors, they give you enough money so you can pay $4, $6, $8 billion so that you can, have to put in another 100 million or 200 million every year.
And that 100 million, 200 million every year that Mark Cuban is referring to is the luxury tax payments going into the second apron. The quiet part that's not being said out loud is the fact that this was a situation that was facing the Mavericks once the brand new owners came in, because Luka's extension was coming up, and also Kyrie Irving and others. But at the same time, the number that they would have re-signed Luka at would have been close to 70 million a year. So just that number alone already puts them close to that second apron. Matter of fact, it puts them well above the second apron, because even before that extension, the Mavericks were already paying about $5 million into the luxury tax. So some Dallas Mavericks fans, they might be already aware, but a lot of the issues about sending Luka quickly to LA almost for nothing really came over those numbers, just paying deep into the luxury tax year in, year out, while at the same time, they don't necessarily have the personnel inside the building that knows how to build a team around him. The Mavericks, of course, got to the finals, but they went through a lot of changes mid-season in order to get that roster together, but it happened to work. Right now, the Lakers are facing the same scenario because his 10-year Supermax is coming up. He can opt out early in 2028 and sign for that 10-year Supermax number, which will earn him well over $80 million a season.
I thought it was really interesting that earlier when you talked about why you sold, you said, look, to own a team now, the best way to maximize value is the real estate.
Yeah.
You have to have, like, whether it's a shopping plaza, you look at the Battery in Atlanta, hotels. I mean, I'm from Boston. I always think of Patriot Place, which was years and years ago before this became a trend. But it's a giant mall, and there's bowling and
Yeah, we had
restaurants and
Victory
bars.
Plaza at the American Airlines Center, and it did okay, but that's not the business I wanted to be in. The best part about owning the Mavs was I could go out in the court and shoot before a game, and when there was a buzzer beater, I can run on the court and not get arrested. But the emotional connection of it is intense. The anxiety levels, the mental health levels are intense. And so, it was draining, and I just thought, like, okay, it's time. I didn't want to have to worry about, building whatever. I didn't want to have to worry about private equity coming in, and the conversations in the Board of Governors moved from, okay, how do we make it better for fans? Not that they don't care about fans, but just the conversation in the Board of Governors meetings was all about valuations.
And that right there is a complete different conversation. And also going back to what he said, I just didn't want to get into building whatever. NBA teams today on the billionaire level has moved into a different asset class, just owning it. And with the current media landscape today just being so consolidated, the money is kind of scarce. So these owners are looking at these teams now like a real estate play. We're going to get these stadiums perhaps a little bit outside of the cities where it's less dense, and we're going to build resorts, hotels. We're going to have the casinos. That's where the gambling comes in. Everything is going to be all in the same ecosystem, just like how the Golden State Warriors have it down there at Chase Center, just having access to make money off of commercial real estate, the farmers market, fine dining. A lot of these new NBA owners that are coming in today, this is the end goal that they have in mind. That's why private equity is coming in and help fund some of these owners to acquire these teams. The NBA right now is definitely in different times, and that's why the conversations of evaluations keep coming up over fan experience. It's almost like it's a blind spot because in a way, fans today have way more options, especially younger generations, on what can keep them entertained. They got individual streamers, a bunch of different YouTube channels. They got other platforms. They can go live themselves. Shit, we not even factor in Grand Theft Auto 6 when that comes out. That's going to be a whole universe of just different silos keeping people entertained. Private equity better be careful because they got to understand pimping out fan loyalty. There is going to be a breaking point, and that loyalty is not a guarantee going into the future.
I mean, when I bought the Mavs, I paid $285 million. 10 years later, the NBA could not sell the Charlotte or the New Orleans team to anybody. It had to take over the New Orleans team, and the valuations 10 years later were still 280 some whatever million dollars. And I didn't care about the valuation. We went through the great financial crisis and everything sucked. People didn't have money. I wasn't worried about that. I cared about winning, and then we got to the point where franchises got so expensive, it was almost always, some level of private equity involvement. And when you're having to bring in money, you're obligated to those people. And when you have obligations because you're raising money, it's not just about winning, because all those people you brought in, particularly the private equity guys, they don't want to write checks for capital calls because you went into the luxury tax or you were above the second apron.
AKA, they don't give a fuck about winning, and we're already seeing it. Once again, Luka has been on the Lakers for 2 seasons in his prime, coming off of an NBA Finals appearance, and there's no rush to put some major pieces around him. We've never seen this from the Laker organization before. They normally have that winning mindset, that standard that was set by Dr. Buss. But now with new ownership, don't be shocked if that's just something of the past.
That's not why they're there. They're not running on the court on a buzzer beater. They're not, they might get, free beers and a chance to get some balls signed for their kids, or maybe they get pictures, and they can bring their kids in the back. just became a different beast, and it wasn't near as much fun.
Now, see, what's interesting to me is you have guys buying teams who they can't afford it themselves, and that's okay. Bill Chisholm, Celtics, $6 billion, they're approved initially, and then they go out and get the money. And as you alluded to, there's not many places to look other than private equity. And they're in it for the turnaround, and the valuations are hockey sticking like crazy. Right after the Celtics $6 billion, you had the Lakers at a $10 billion valuation to Mark Walter. So now as you look in the next 10 years, you got to think PE is almost always going to be involved. And, I don't mean it to be like a Pollyannish question, but is something lost now in owning a team? Because as you said, you loved it for owning the team.
It's totally different. Yeah, it's totally different. I remember when I came in and I was the young guy, and all the old school owners just hated my ass. Hated. There was one guy, the guy who owned the Pistons, I think it was, and I'd gotten fined already a couple times. I hadn't even owned the team 6 months. And he stood up in a board meeting. No, I stood up at the board meeting, and he was, shut your motherfucking ass up until you have done something in this league. And then I started to respond to him, and I called him by the wrong name, and David Stern had to step in. But it was just a different vibe. And then as those guys got out, then people came in, and they were more like me, right? They loved the game. They played some, even if they just liked it, right? They played some, and they were more vocal, more connected to the players. And now it's PE guys.
Ooh, that's the worst. That is the worst. They just look at the teams, and even the fan loyalty is just an asset. No emotional ties. And Mark Cuban right here elaborating on how he changed the standard of the relationship an owner had with his team. There was an organic passion, sort of a fan appeal that he had. A lot of these new owners coming in, that connection is not there. That's why tanking this season especially has been a major issue, because they're basically reading it off a spreadsheet. They're seeing the benefits of tanking. You get to select a star in the lottery and get him for cheap for 7 seasons. Also, you could participate in luxury tax payments from other teams, while at the same time you keep your costs low, because you just basically have a bunch of minimum players or just young players who just got into the league. But that same disconnect that they have just looking at all the benefits is how young players who they just drafted are being affected by the tanking. They're getting a little bit too comfortable, building bad habits, and coaches have to end up doing their jobs different because they have to lose games on purpose. Where's the reps in order to be successful? It's just not going to happen overnight.
And it's run much more like a business than it is as a passion. And that doesn't apply to everybody. There are certainly exceptions, but it just changed completely. And I sold at the end of 23, but I literally had written an email to Adam Silver in October of 22 saying this is what I'm going to do, and gave him these exact reasons.
We had Mark Lazary in here, who he was in that seat, and I asked him about selling his stake in the Bucks and just how much of it was about Giannis, which he alluded to a little bit. Now, he, like you, said it was time. But I also wonder to what extent
he was only there 5 years,
Well, that's right. I mean,
and he's a prime example of the kind of owners that are coming into the league. They barely have a connection with the team. They just really look at it from a transaction standpoint. Giannis's contract was coming up. They did not want to dip into the luxury tax, and they end up selling it to, I believe, one of the Cleveland Brown owners. Matter of fact, let's listen directly as we hear from Mark Lazary speak on how now he's on the investment side of the business, and just look at his point of view, and even the way the woman asked the question about NBA teams mostly having their value in the real estate. And also, Lazary touched base on pimping out that fan loyalty, raising ticket prices because fans year in, year out are loyal.
What, you think that the froth is done at some point? I'm just trying to understand how you can suck more value out of something that doesn't have the real estate yet. How do you get more value from them?
Well, I think the way you'll get more value, look, you only make money in sports 3 ways. So it's ticket sales, sponsorship, and media. So if the Celtics win again, they'll be able to raise ticket prices anywhere between 10 to 20%. If you have a team that's the worst in the league, that team is still raising prices 5-10%. Nobody stops giving up on their team. It's actually one of the great little secrets about pro sports. Every year, the whole mantra in sports is next year is our year, right? And everybody believes that.
So right there, you're hearing it directly from the source. The real estate play is the major appeal of why all this Saudi money, private equity is coming into the league. And they're definitely looking to pimp out that fan loyalty. But right here, we're going to continue hearing from Mark Cuban elaborate on that real estate play.
Dallas is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. If you want to do a casino and if you want to build and you're into real estate, there's no better city. And so it made perfect sense. Fans know it's not always going to go your way. Fans know there's going to be seasons that you thought were going to be good that turn out bad and vice versa. But if you're sharing in the misery as an owner and you're telling them you're going to do what you're going to do, right, and how you see it, that's beautiful for fans. I mean, that is the way every owner should communicate with fans. There is no business without your fans. And I said it from day one when I bought the Mavs. I don't own the team. I'm just the steward of the team. The fans own the team. If they don't show up, we're done. If they're not fans, we're done. If they don't want to watch, we're done. If families aren't Mavs families, we're done. And you can't just accept that that's going to continue. You have to get out there and connect to them. You always saw me take pictures, always. You always saw me sign autographs, always. Never an exception, simply because those are my customers. And I don't think we treat them as customers.
And right away, Laker fans are seeing this in real time. Their ticket prices going from one season to the next, in some sections, is up by almost 45%. And never before that season ticket holders had to deal with a 3% admin fee. But this really shouldn't come by no surprise. It's going to be the new norm with this type of institutional money taking over.
Well, so the irony is, I imagine they're betting that the imprimatur of the NBA is part of the value.
Of course it is.
You're in bed with the ultimate.
Of course it is. And there's true value there, right? But part of it is all that money is just supposed to go right to the owners, right? This is just an equity valuation play for the owners. And the smart, I would have been all for it. There's no downside as an owner. But at the same time, you have to look at the fan bases. And, I'm sure the NBA does their studies, their research and all that. Adam's not stupid. Mark Tatum's not stupid. Bill Koenig's not stupid. They know their shit, right? But at the same time, I can't even, as, what's the right, not vociferous, but just as committed as fans are to their teams in Europe and the clubs that they've grown up with, they're still more loyal to a team, where here fans have evolved to be more loyal to a player. Right? I grew up a Pittsburgh fan of everything. If I wasn't, my dad would disown me. Even when the Steelers always suck. SOS, same old Steelers. We are the Steelers, right? My buddies were up watching the Penguins late. I just went to a meeting and somebody from Pittsburgh, I was up late watching the Penguins lose to the Flyers. That's Pittsburgh. And that's just like Europe, Chicago, Pittsburgh. That's the way they look at teams. And walking into that set of circumstances thinking just because you're the NBA, I think that arrogance will backfire.
It's crazy because out of all the sports, the NBA happens to be that kind of league where a lot of the fan bases, especially the younger demo that these corporations want to attract, they do love the individual player over these teams. They kind of follow just that one guy. There's Laker fans and there's Kobe fans. There's people who love LeBron no matter where he goes, etc., etc. And when you combine that with an audience that has a plethora of streaming options and just ways to keep them entertained, you wonder how things will look like going forward. But adding on to all that, we're now going to hear Mark Cuban talk about streaming, as the tech companies have a different goal in mind that does not include ratings, but their ambitions in streaming doesn't necessarily help the NBA long term.
But is there a point at which the market becomes oversaturated? I mean, how much new basketball can the world support?
It's not so much about how much new basketball, it's about revenue streams. Because right now, sports is doing really, really well on all medias, right? Streaming, it's killing it. But the unknown parameter, the unknown KPI, if you will, is retention, is subscription retention. I think what broke the bank for everybody and was a blessing to all sports teams was when Peacock spent $100 million on the NFL and got one game and got 3 million subscribers and retained all of them. That became the benchmark. And they went out and spent $2.6 billion with the NBA. And, now that they've got about 9% churn, I don't know what the number is that says above this number, it's not good, or below this number, it's fine. But it's not about ratings anymore. We like to cover, you guys love to talk about ratings. Ratings are irrelevant. It's subscriptions and churn. Do you create new subscriptions? Because that's the money. Yes, they sell ads, and yes, they want to sell more, but that's not the primary source of revenue.
But also at the same time, that only serves the tech companies. What's the measurement for Adam Silver in the league to figure out if their audience is growing or just being sustained? That's why a lot of the NBA owners are making the real estate play with these stadiums. They are somewhat anticipating in the future the media side of the revenue going down, and they're going to make that up by having the casino in the same area as the arena, a hotel, fine dining, restaurants, shopping, even apartment buildings. I believe there's an MLB team in Atlanta or in Charlotte. They have a set of apartment buildings. Definitely be on the lookout for some of your favorite teams to be leaving your local downtown area and going out into the suburbs.
I don't know what the number is that says above this number, it's not good, or below this number, it's fine. But it's not about ratings anymore. We like to cover, you guys love to talk about ratings. Ratings are irrelevant. It's subscriptions and churn. Do you create new subscriptions? Because that's the money. Yes, they sell ads, and yes, they want to sell more, but that's not the primary source of revenue.
Now, not everything has the sticking power of NFL and getting one NFL game.
Even the NFL, right? I mean, they have got to, every professional sports, any league that makes their money from TV, quote unquote, right, whether it's streaming or linear, understands that linear TV is dying and it's becoming completely dependent on sports, and so when you have 60-70% of whatever it is of your revenue coming from basically one industry, we would give you shit on Shark Tank, and so that has to be a concern, and everybody looks to that and says, well, we can hopefully get a real TV deal / streaming deal and generate revenue there, or we can sell subscriptions. But I can tell you, when you look at the individual team subscriptions, local subscriptions for NBA teams, they ain't all that, And so there's still a lot of risk associated with what's going on.
Dying, but not dead yet, as I like to say. I mean, we're living through the transition period.
Yeah, that whole thing when streaming started 30 years ago, and we said that, this is what was going to happen, just took a little longer than we expected. But it's still completely dependent, other than maybe Amazon, on subscriptions.
And that's going to present a major problem for not just the NBA, the other sports leagues also going into the future. We see Netflix already hit that saturation point when it comes to subscriptions. And today they're more focused on building out an advertising model within their platform.
And you've got Netflix going to event-driven sports, and that works for them, but their numbers aren't going through the roof. Have they reached a ceiling where you can do event-driven or a couple games or Christmas Day? I don't know. But the idea of the ratings are up, the ratings are down, meaningless numbers. I mean, that helps advertising sales on the margin, but it's all about subscription revenue, because that is what pays the bills. When Netflix reports their earnings, they talk about ad revenue, but how many subscribers do you have locally or globally? When, NBC Peacock reports, how many subscribers do you have? Disney, how many subscribers do you have? They don't look at the average ratings anymore at all.
It's funny, when you look around at the upstart leagues, as I said, so many of them have attempted to harness that trend. TGL, Unrivaled, all these younger leagues, that what they've done right is they're short, it seems to me. They've handled, you say ratings are relevant, well, we're still gonna talk about them, right? And the big leagues have a problem, and that is the regular season is so long. They're all doing stuff to try and make it interesting.
I don't think it's so long.
Well,
right? I really don't. And, TGL and Unrivaled, that's great. It's made for TV, and they kept it short because they wanted to keep their salaries lower, and they wanted to fit in gaps, right?
And appointment viewing.
And there's no such thing as appointment viewing, right? Well, I take that back. They're for specific sports teams, if you really like them, or a sport, if you really love it, then you'll make the time to go there. But I mean, I don't know if those leagues made money. I have no idea. Not yet. And so it's not going to be easy. It really is not.
Cuban is right. Some of those leagues didn't really make any money. And also, just examining the way the NBA kind of built their league around that 82 game schedule, it fit for television broadcasting, which at the time, the governments were involved on who can get certain slots, what could actually be shown, etc., etc. So the NFL, the NBA, a lot of these sports leagues that have been around for well over 80 years, the scheduling was really made for that kind of format. But under streaming, those long schedules have no impact on these platforms. I had seen one time a Facebook executive had made a comment about them showing a live MLB game on the platform, and he said it basically has zero impact. So once again, these tech platforms are examining these leagues a lot different and seeing how they could fit within their ecosystem. Netflix is sitting on a bunch of cash, but they want event-driven games, the must-haves. This is a complete different relationship than what the sports leagues were used to having with just broadcasters.
And so, it's worth trying, and there's an opportunity there, but I don't think it's the length of the season. I think it's the length of the games. Because when you look at the amount of time played in a game, like the NFL's 15 minutes of playing time.
People love to cite that stat, I know.
And it's real, right? And it's the lowest, it has the least amount of actual playing time of any professional sport.
Makes it higher stakes every play.
No, it means you can go to the bathroom, you can check your email, you have time to play fantasy football, right? You can do everything else. You don't have to commit brain time or attention time for more than 15 minutes. That's critical, because that's the problem with the NHL. So if you think about it, Major League Baseball sped up their game. The ratings popped up some. It's still slow, but they sped it up. It got better. People got excited.
That's another interesting thing about streaming or just anything involving these tech platforms. Human nature stands out a lot more within these ecosystems. In a way, it's almost like we're watching these leagues trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Like the puzzle piece just doesn't fit under streaming. The only reason they're there is because the tech platforms are sitting on a lot of cash and they're still under the audience acquisition phase. All the streaming services like Peacock, Netflix, Hulu, Disney, ESPN Plus, even Apple and YouTube TV, all these services are still in the audience acquisition phase. And the money going into the future is not a guarantee. We know there's going to be a ceiling when it comes to that subscriber count.
Even with the AI umpires now, right? What do they call APB? I forget what they...
ABS,
right? APB. Other than that, even though it slowed it down a little bit, it sped up the game. And then if you look at the lowest ratings, straight 60 minutes of time, hockey, MLS, right? And I really think if the NBA went from 48 minutes to 40 minutes, it would change it 180 degrees for the better. College basketball, no one says, oh, damn, these games are only 48 minutes. Boy, that Final Four would have been so much better if this game was 48 minutes. Nobody says it about the WNBA. Nobody says it about any league, anywhere in the world. No one looked at the Olympics and said, damn, the dream team would have been a dream if they played 48 minutes. But if those games are 40 minutes, now all of a sudden, you don't have to concentrate so much. The game gets compressed enough where there's more action and more, it's not so much every game's important, but every possession becomes more important. Then all of a sudden, we've all seen the games when 36 minutes in, the worst team, is winning, and you think the better team's going to come back. 40 minutes, you're going to run out of time. So you'll see a lot more upsets. Teams will have to come up with different strategies. So I'm a firm believer, and Adam brought it up, but I'm a firm believer in 40 minutes. And I used to tell that to the NBA, the shorter the amount of playing time, the better the response.
Oh, for sure. These leagues will definitely adapt, and it will be because of the audience, not because they care about historical records or pretend to. We see with the 65 game rule and the way certain guys can't make all NBA teams and win certain awards, they never really cared about the historical stats, especially if the money is right. But MLB introducing the pitch clock is one of the prime examples of how these leagues will eventually change depending on the audience, because that's what it's all about. They got to maintain an audience, especially a younger generation coming in and talking about the game, eventually passing it down to their kids. But Mark Cuban also elaborated on expansion, and he gave great insight to even how that interaction with NBA owners is different because of private equity.
Like, I remember when Charlotte came into the league, and I remember having a conversation with some owners that I won't name, and I was like, you realize that this is just a loan and they're getting the team for free. And they were like, no, Mark, we're getting $300 million, right? That's a little, because there are 29 teams, so that's a little bit more than 10 million each. I'm like, no, but we went from 1/29th of all the money to 1/30th of the money. And that delta is what, that they're using to recapture everything they put up. And the same applies now. And with the TV deal being a lot bigger, the numbers have to be a lot bigger. And it's still just a loan, but it's a 60-year loan. And it's a way, in a world where the teams have so heavily geared towards private equity, again, not all teams, it's a way for them to get money out sooner. And it's the same with NBA Europe, right? It's just a way to monetize. And that's what that's the gearing towards it. And I feel bad for Adam because it's a much harder job.
Yeah, with this changing landscape, it's definitely a much harder job for Adam Silver, because even for these new owners to borrow money, the interest rate is a lot higher than in previous years. That's why all the Saudi and private equity money is coming in. But those entities have their own ambitions, and the interactions with the league is going to be a lot different on all levels, including for us fans. Wow, we'd even factor in sports gambling. That's a whole nother monster on its own. But Mark Cuban elaborated on just the leagues now accepting sports gambling and how integrated it is.
What do you think about the overall embrace of legal sports betting by all the leagues?
Sports betting is not the problem, whether it's Kalshi or traditional sports betting. It's the prop bets that are the problem. I don't think we fully considered all the permutations of betting that would be created and the simplicity of betting online. Because when the original conversations, you could discuss, online poker and it was dead. It had gone like this, and then they outlawed it for the most part. And then it was still going to a sports book. And going to a sports book, there's some limitations, right? But then when it went all online and the, daily fantasy sports kind of boosted it up, then it was like, okay, but daily fantasy sports isn't necessarily a problem. Betting on wins and losses, end of quarter scores isn't a problem. But, now when you're betting, does a guy pick his nose at the free throw line with under 6 minutes up by more than 12? That creates a lot of perverse incentives. And I think that's created a problem. And I think that's one of the reasons, obviously I wasn't involved with Kalshi, the NBA and other leagues doing deals with the prediction markets, simply because they want, it's not because so much about their money or the data feeds, it's more because they want to limit the types of predictions or bets.
Partner with them because then we have more control over
exactly
keeping things we don't like off the platform.
We'll let you keep on doing it if you limit the types of bets.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the prop bets got a few NBA players, past and present, caught up. Matter of fact, it's been such a rough start. I'll just say this. Giannis would have been in Miami sooner had it not been for that Terry Rozier case. The NBA had did an investigation before Terry Rozier was even traded to Miami, and they gave a first-round pick in order to acquire him, and they took on his salary. So both those things should have never happened. Matter of fact, that he even put up a case to get the trade revoked. Adam Silver definitely has a lot on his hands, but overall, this was a great insight into how a lot of the business has changed throughout the years. And for us fans, the interaction with the league is going to be a lot different. So Trae Young has sat down and reflected on being traded from the Hawks and admitted that, hey, for the first time, this is the most slept on he's ever felt. Keep in mind, the league has gone through a lot of changes since 2021, Those non-basketball moves, even their landing zone, like James Harden, where he used to land sideways and try to draw fouls. Also, let me say this, the small ball era has ended. Quiet is kept. And Trae Young, being one of many Stephen Curry babies, has to adapt in this new landscape. He can still thrive, but he's going to have to add a couple additional tools to his arsenal. He could take prime examples from Jalen Brunson. But for Ice Trae, it was quite interesting in his few last seasons in Atlanta. The Hawks struggled to build a team around him. He went through numerous coaches, and also the team did not have a president for over 3 seasons because it was considered a lame duck job. As soon as Trae Young was traded on January 7th, they quickly promoted their GM into team president by March. And that was the first time they had that position filled in over 4 seasons. The NBA has also entered into the era of the second apron, where certain stars who are not available and they have a large salary attached to them are difficult to move. The Wizards were able to pull off that trade, virtually giving up nothing. We also seen other stars outside of Trae Young have difficulty in the trade market, i.e. Anthony Davis and Ja Morant. All those players fall in line with just having a lot of salary on the books and also not necessarily being available to play on the floor. This actually hurts teams in the current era. But again, we do love to see Ice Trae in the playoffs. He does put on a hell of a show, and it'll be beautiful to see him get back there. But he finally spoke on the Hawks trade and also feeling the most slept on in his whole career at this very moment. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
You kind of mentioned it like I'm people size, but folks gonna try you, right? And folks gonna sleep on you, and they gonna make you prove it. And you've done that in every phase of your career. How much does right now in your career feel like another one of those moments where people are sleeping on you and you got to go out and prove it again?
Oh, I mean, this is the most slept on I've been in my whole life. Like even when I was in high school, I wasn't this slept on. Like I felt like I could have been top 5 in my class. I should have been top 10. Number 1 point guard, I felt like, but I was number 4. So was I slept on a little bit? Maybe, but this is, I mean, it's starting to feel a certain way. But for me, I know it's all, I've learned over the years, there's a lot of recency bias that goes on, especially in media. And I mean, I got a podcast too, so I'm not just throwing y'all into all the media. Right. I know what you do, but like, I know there's a lot of recency bias that goes into media. And I know if we start winning, imagine the Wizards as the number 1 team in the East next year, what people are gonna be saying. So it's just like, I can't get caught up in what people are saying now, as mad as it makes me, and what people say about me is not true. And yes, I haven't played very much in a year and a half because of some injuries and a trade and things like that. But trust me, I'm probably just entering my prime. Like the way people talk about me is just funny, and I just can't wait to go out there and play. And I know that's what changes the narrative. So I can't necessarily get caught up in what people think right now. I got to go out there and do it again.
And a lot of us do believe Trae Young can do it again. But this time around, he's going to have to mold himself more into a team frame. Make sure his teammates are more involved, because he does have quite a few different variation of teammates while he was on the Atlanta Hawks. And that right there kind of hurt him a little bit. That's the beautiful thing about the overall game. It's constantly changing. And at this very moment, the league is in a transition from the small ball era into more what I would say a parity league era, where there's more of a team concept involved, sort of how the NBA was in the 1980s if you look it up. The basketball was moving around a lot more. You had multiple decision makers on teams. And because of Magic Johnson coming in, being that 6'9" guard, teams were kind of chasing that type of dynamic. That's where we see today the Anthony Edwards kind of being that playmaker, the SGAs, the Paolo Bancheros, Cade Cunninghams. These guys are not necessarily point guards, but just seeing how the way they play, it looks like they have point guard duties. There's also other up-and-comers like Jalen Johnson on the Hawks, Tyrese Maxey on the 76ers. He's not necessarily a traditional point guard. Dylan Harper on the Spurs, Amen Thompson on the Rockets. The list goes on, but the league is slowly shifting away from those small ball lineups, and we're seeing the return of the big men. You got Jokic, Wemby, Embiid, Chet Holmgren, and even Giannis. So there is a lot of adjustments Trae Young has to make, because this is a completely different landscape than it was pre-2021, where teams were kind of playing more small. He had the advantage of just all those non-basketball moves in which they made the rule change. We're going to see how he's going to adapt being in Washington. The management there right now, they've had a great game plan in just bringing back that organization into prominence. Trae has a lot of talent around him, and it's going to be very hard to come up with an excuse of why there's not a winning record on this talented team. But Ice Trae right here also reflected on the Hawks trade for the first time.
This last trade that happened, a lot of people don't even know, and I don't even know how much I really want to go into it. Like I fuck it. We that was a trade that I knew was gonna happen if I didn't come out the gates playing well, and I got hurt. My teammate fell into me, and I knew in the summertime, even the summertime before when we got the schedule, I'm like, I know like this tough beginning part of the season is very tough. Like if we don't come out really good, me and Porzingis, we don't come out good, they're gonna trade us and they're gonna rebuild. You know what I'm saying? And so I kind of knew after I got hurt my MCL, I was like, this isn't. I mean, you can feel the energy around the building. Like in me, it's like it ain't really felt like this. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of knew it was coming, and my agent and my GM, they were at the time. They were already talking, and so I just wanted to leave a certain way. I didn't want to leave and make it public, right, and make it seem like I hated Atlanta, because I never will hate Atlanta. Atlanta will forever be my second home, and so I just wanted to leave the right way, and so that wasn't surprising. What was surprising was whenever it got out that the Wizards may be a team with me, right, and it got released. You know what I'm saying? And that got out. And so then I wanted to put out that, I wanted us to put out that I wanted to go there. You know what I'm saying? Not like they just shipped me to Washington, because that wasn't gonna be the case.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so that was more of the shocking part. But the two trades, the first one was more shocking because the second one, I mean, we worked together to get me to where I want to go.
That injury Trae Young had in the beginning of the season was very unfortunate, but also the rise of Jalen Johnson just being demoted or demoting himself into the G League for a year or two, because I believe he was in that same draft alongside Cam Reddish, and he worked his way up. And not only when he got the opportunity to start, the Hawks were winning games. So again, in the NBA, it's a constant rotation of just new players or guys who could potentially become your replacement. With constant change comes constant adaptation. And this right here I thought was very interesting, because Trae Young was asked about Jalen Brunson being a small guard and watching him basically walk Wemby down in the finals, especially around the paint area.
I can play multiple ways. Like a lot of people just see what I've done and me being ball dominant. I can't wait to show other things. Like my boy RJ, like, who's with me 24/7. Like he was my point guard for a lot of years, and I was just a shooter. Like I didn't do nothing but just shoot the ball. So I can't wait to show that. But also, yes, you can win with a smaller guard, of course. It's been done before. Is it easy? No. You have to have the right team and the right chemistry, the right build. But you see what it's doing. You see how it can be built. You see how it can be done. And so that is part of a reason why, of course, I'm not cheering for neither team, but I always cheer for the smaller guards. And when I was coming up, that's why the Steph comparisons happened, because he's winning championships and he's in the finals every year, and I'm like a smaller guy, light skin, come in, and that's where that happens. So yeah. I always cheer for the underdog, but also the small guard for sure.
And Steph Curry, he mainly plays off ball. He's not a regular traditional point guard or just even shooting guard, but he's completely off ball for most of the time. But hey, we'll see if Trae Young could actually display playing multiple different ways, as he alluded to, because the Hawks, they've definitely shown that they didn't fully understand how to build around him. The fact that they left the position of team president open for about 4 seasons, and as soon as Trae Young was traded, Quinn Snyder, the head coach, quickly got an extension. For certain players, it's much more difficult to build around him. Trae Young still had a nice playoff run pre-2021. Let's not forget he did give Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons the business in the playoffs. And I'm not going to lie, it's fun to see Trae get into that postseason. He does bring a different flair to the game, which is much needed. The landscape today is quite different. Stars like Trae Young are judged on how well their contracts are also structured. It's not just the star value that holds up. The money has to align, and also the availability has to be on point. It's just the way the league is structured right now. So this will be part 2 of my coverage of the Jaylen Brown saga in Boston. And make no mistake about it, things are heating up. And this will be multi-layered, as it's always good to take you off your daily algorithms and get into some more nuanced topics. But Jaylen Brown in the middle of the summer will be eligible for a 2-year, $142 million extension on top of the deal he already has. And he's coming off a tremendous season where the Boston Celtics coming into the year had no expectations. Now in part 1 of my coverage, I'll put the link in the description below, very subtly alluded to the fact that Joe Mazzulla and the Boston Celtics quickly went off of him and in a different direction, more towards Jason Tatum, even though he was coming back from injury. It was very subtle, but he kind of brought it up twice. Keep in mind, during the regular season, he probably was one of the best two-way players in the league, having major scoring duels with guys like Kawhi Leonard while dropping 50 points. There was also a night where he went back and forth with Devin Booker. They both were going in, dropping 40 points each. And Jaylen was definitely a menace as he got to the line and shot 21 free throws. Also in both matchups against OKC, he went off, leading his team in scoring even in the second game on March 25th with Jason Tatum alongside him. And we got to take a step back and remember, during Jaylen Brown's whole reign in Boston, there was always a misalignment with the Celtics understanding his true value. Brad Stevens had a tough time managing all the personalities that was on that 2017 Celtics team, with the politics of Gordon Hayward getting paid so much money, but yet he was coming back off an injury, not looking like he would be the same person. The addition of Kyrie Irving on the team also added a different layer of complexity. So they had Jaylen Brown coming off the bench. He was consistently in trade rumors. Brad Stevens, once again, he had to manage all those guys, including Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart. There was a lot of I need to get mine energy coming off that team. And them going to the Eastern Conference Finals without Kyrie did not help either. But again, in this segment, we're going to get into it, as Jaylen Brown is going to let it be known of how things were when he first arrived in Boston and how they didn't necessarily make him feel valued, while at the same time trying to control him. Things are going to get interesting, as we'll also hear from an NBA player, and he gives great insight to a lot of the rumblings he's hearing from the Celtics side about Jaylen Brown. To kick this off, this is going to be a nice backdrop right here, as we're going to hear from Brad Stevens at one of his pressers at the end of the season, and he was asked about Jaylen Brown.
Brad, Jaylen has expressed a lot of frustration in the immediate aftermath of the loss, and Tracy McGrady came out today or yesterday. Obviously, Tracy's close with Jaylen and said Jaylen has some frustrations with the organization. Have you felt any of those frustrations? Has he expressed them to you? Is the relationship with Jaylen, has that evolved at all?
Before Brad answers, keep in mind what I said before about Jaylen Brown mentioning on his live stream how the Celtics quickly changed what their initial game plan was during the regular season once Jason Tatum made his return. And that's another thing. Tatum is not even guaranteed to be the same Jason Tatum before the injury. That's still yet to be determined. But we're hearing a lot of trade rumors involving Brown's name when it comes to Giannis.
I talked to Jaylen Monday a little bit after he just real quickly and was nothing but positive. He has not expressed those frustrations to me. We've been here 10 years together, and I do think that, obviously I love JB and everybody around here loves JB. And, I think just like any of our other guys, as we get to the end of the season, I'll be here, and my door's always open. And if anybody ever wants to come in and talk about it, and talk about, their team, their place, whatever the case may be, I'm all ears. And that would be 1 through 16, not just, not just Jaylen, not just Jason, not just the guys that have been here. I think it's really important to be available. So I certainly am, and none of that has been expressed to me.
Now, Brad Stevens is in a very unique position when it comes to Jaylen Brown, because this was very unexpected for Tatum to be out and for Jaylen Brown to lead this team in a 50-plus win season. The way they changed their playoff game plan, just going back to Tatum, might have been a little bit too early. You got to be very delicate, because throughout the years, as we'll hear from Jaylen Brown right now, we're going to see the relationship with the Celtics hasn't necessarily been one of them consistently letting him know that he's valued. And at times, as Jaylen Brown's going to allude right here, the Celtics really try to control him. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Man, but I would say, I think that sums it up perfectly. We all have different views of ourselves, different views from our parents, different views from people back home, different views from the organization, and it all might not be the reality of where you at right now. So the problem is, I think sometimes is that patience and a plan or a strategy doesn't come into effect. It just thinks I'm supposed to get this right now. And at some point, it's like, maybe you make that decision where it's not gonna work out here. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. Or maybe my reality in my brain is not the reality I'm living. But at some point, those decisions have to get made. But for me, how I looked at it is like, I'm gonna accept the role that they are offering me while knowing the role that I have for myself, right? And I'm gonna do your role to perfection, but I'm gonna sneak my little 1-2 in there, every chance I get, basically. Yeah. So now my strategy is I'm gonna show the people. I didn't care about the front office. Once you get the people talking about it, the front office is gonna start making decisions. Yeah. Because they got pressure on them. Like, I remember the Boston Celtics. We remember the year we came back. Gordon came back. Kyrie came back after the year that we took the team almost to the finals in 2018. Yep. Then we come back to the next year. Gordon and Kyrie are now back on that team, and so now we got this loaded team with all this talent. They decided to move me to the bench, which was understandable. You got guys, you making $30 million or whatever, but as a 20-year-old kid who is extremely talented, that slowed down my development.
And Brad Stevens right there did not know how to manage all those different kind of personalities and the political situations. But Jaylen Brown right here lets it be known of one of the only reasons why he started is because he got to the fan bases first, and they started making noise about why isn't he part of the starting five.
So in that moment, like, how do I get back to where I want to get back to? Now I'm getting criticized for not working on my game. Right. Now I'm getting criticized for not being ready for my opportunities. In reality, it was we just had a stacked deck, and it was too much responsibility for, everyone to equally share. So what I did was like, how do you win over the fans, right? Anytime I'm on the floor, I'm the best defender on the floor, and then I'm creating highlights where I'm like, if I get a fast break, if you look at that year, I'm windmilling it. Yeah. I get a fast break, I'm down here with it. So now they start to be like, why isn't this kid playing more? Right? And why isn't he playing more consistently? And they start asking those questions. And in Boston, what ended up happening, this is like a forgotten moment in time, but they ended up having a petition, like the fans sent a petition, like put Jaylen back in the starting lineup. Wow. And that eventually made the Celtics put me back in the starting lineup. Not because I feel like they wanted to. I think Brad preferred Gordon. One, he was making more money. Two, he was coming back off injury. Also the butler.
Now, if you notice that right there, you hear Andre Iguodala laughing because these are parts that Jaylen Brown was not supposed to say out loud. He just stated, I don't think Brad wanted me in the starting lineup. He wasn't supposed to say that part out loud. especially knowing that the situation he's in right now, ending the season and some of his live streams kind of got the NBA media going.
Bubba. So keep it at Bubba. I'm just, you know what I'm saying? They gave Gordon every chance offensively that he absolutely could. And like they felt like he deserved it because he made that big commitment to come from Utah and from being an all-star to now, and it just didn't work out.
Again, that's Danny Ainge trying to manage the politics of that team. And we're seeing right from the get-go, Jaylen Brown remembers not being as valued. We were always hearing his name in trade rumors. Remember the AD for Jaylen Brown rumors. Now it's Giannis for Jaylen Brown, especially coming out of a season where he led a team that should have been tanking to 50+ wins. If we sit back and had to bet all the money in our bank account, would we say a healthy Jason Tatum is guaranteed to do the same thing? Just think about it for a sec. And with that in mind, knowing how Jaylen Brown was treated when he first arrived in Boston, not being as valued, we're now going to hear him explain how they were also trying to control his voice.
It's like, it's a bigger game going on. And obviously I love to play the game of basketball. And I've talked about this before. Sports is a mechanism, could be viewed as a mechanism for control. And I remember the first time I said that, I was 20 years old. I had just gotten to the league. I was in Boston, and I'm thinking I'm talking to like a normal beat writer. Happened to be like this big writer for The Guardian. And it was like, this dude put me on the cover of The Guardian newspaper saying, Jaylen Brown says sports is a mechanism for control. That's when I was 19 years old. And then that went viral. And then that's when I got invited to Harvard to go speak about it. So Harvard invited me based on that article in The Guardian to come speak about it. That's why I became the youngest Harvard lecturer. Because I was talking about how sports is a mechanism for control. Because that became controversial. Like, how could this 19-year-old player say sports is a mechanism for control when sports the NBA just helped him recreate generational wealth? He just changed his whole family's life through sport. How could he criticize it, right? So I got a lot of pushback, even from my organization. Danny Ainge came and talked to me, like, what is this? Of course, you're 19 years old, you just got drafted, your family, how can you say that sports is a mechanism for control? They didn't understand, but there was understanding that needed to be had. And I spoke to that at 19, and I still speak to it to this day. Sports is so political. It is like everything that we could talk about so many different times that I could bring up just through my career. And I could even talk about what's going on right now. The statements that are being made, it's political as fuck. So I think that's the biggest misconception. I think a lot of people still who watch, they think like, oh, it's just sports, it's just entertainment. Let me turn my brain off. No, but you being programmed to think a certain way through the sports, through the marketing, through the statements, through what the players is pushing, and what we co-signing, what the league is co-signing, what they marketing on it, all of that stuff is a part of it. It's propaganda.
AKA, it sounds like he's talking about the gambling. 90% of that sounds like he's talking about the gambling. But again, we're now seeing how the relationship was when he first initially got there. Not feeling valued. They're trying to control his voice. They're questioning him on what he's telling the media. A lot of these sports leagues are major real estate for just cultural influence. That's the reason in recent years we've seen a major push for a lot of the political personalities to kind of merge themselves in the sports world. It's because they get that understanding. They're trying to attach themselves to that cultural real estate to influence people to believe in their political candidates or just whatever philosophies they go by. But again, Jaylen Brown right here at this tech conference, he gets into a nice bag about what these sports leagues are really all about.
Today, I'm going to be talking about breaking panopticism, also algorithmic social engineering. If I control the technology, I can dictate the market. I'll explain what that means. Michel Foucault, a French philosopher in 1975, in their work Discipline and Punish, talked about panopticism. She based it off of a prison design, right? It was a prison design with a watchtower in the middle of the prison. And this theory was that, like, by putting the watchtower in the middle, the prisoners would police themselves because they're under surveillance. So physical authority has shifted to psychological authority, right? And over time, their behaviors change, and this causes a term she calls dynamic normalization. So in the digital age, the watchtower has transferred. So through technology, through bots, fake viral clips, fake accounts, you can police platforms and algorithmically influence society with the technology that you can control. The technology that you can control can dictate the market. We see it across various industries all the time. A lot of people have seen some of my quarrels with the media industry. That's kind of the reason why I started streaming. You know, some of you have seen my stream and going off on Stephen A. Smith. But exactly, but Stephen A. works for ESPN. ESPN is controlled by Disney. Stephen A. doesn't choose the topics. Somebody chooses them for him. You know, his willingness has made him extremely valuable to these companies. But you know, a lot of these companies and corporations, they meet 4 times a year and talk about amongst various industries how they can socially engineer and influence our minds, right, through the technology that they can control without us really even paying attention and even noticing it. Just like the Michel Foucault theory, where I was talking about the watchtower that is policing the prisoners. Bots, comments, positive comments or negative comments could affirm whatever agendas that they want to push. They can create the bots, they can control kind of the approvals or disapprovals of what is in society. Another example is kind of like group thinking. If I control a bunch of platforms, or I control a bunch of accounts, or have a bunch of partners that are all in cahoots with me, I can also socially engineer conversations, start trends, kind of create a herd mentality where you think it's natural, but it's all algorithmically engineered to dictate the market. And then the last one I would say is like the digital dopamine. A lot of us are addicted to social media, we don't even know it, right? The rewarding feeling of getting likes, the rewarding feeling of getting impressions can cause addiction. And the opposite of that can cause the opposite, anxiety and depression. This is all reinforcing the overarching Michel Foucault's theory, the watchtower. And the philosophy is that physical authority has shifted to psychological authority. I was doing media after Celtics practice, and a writer came up to me and was asking me questions about politics and sports. And I just thought I'll just share my thoughts, the things that I learned at Berkeley. And I ended up telling him that sports is used as a mechanism for control. So that's exactly what he titled the article. Jaylen Brown says sports is used as a mechanism for control. I gained some support, but mostly I got a lot of backlash. The front office, Danny Ainge at the time, called me into his office and was like, how could you say this? You're saying sports is used as a mechanism for control, but you just benefited from sports and changed your family generationally. And he's right. And I told him sports can be used to do great things, bring people together, change people's lives, inspire people, motivate, but it also can be used as the opposite. So I told Danny it could be used as a way to distract people from what's really going on in society. There's panopticons, watchtowers, that exist within sports as well, where media training is like a way of programming athletes to think, act, and behave the same. Nothing controversial, nothing political, nothing unsafe.
And let me say this. Here's another check and balance that the NBA had flexed in case of an emergency. This pertains to what Jaylen Brown just mentioned. Remember during the bubble when the players were willing to walk out and protest, and then a quick call was made. Next thing you know, the players were speaking with Obama during a pandemic where most people were even scared to travel. But yet the NBA was able to make an emergency phone call because they had to protect their money, and Obama quickly was in a face-to-face meeting with the players. These sports leagues have always been very political. Obama was called in to basically sway the players to keep playing and work out some other agreement when it came to the whole taking a stance. The NBA understood what kind of sway Obama had on the players in this exact situation.
And the people that I admire the most were the exact opposite of that. Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, Jim Brown, they all used their platforms for something beyond sports. So while I'm here, while I got my platform, those who are listening and those who may be listening in the future back home, I just want to encourage people to be not afraid to be who you are, be proud of where you come from, and to think critically and think for yourself. When I was in high school, I had to make a big decision. I was the #1 player in the country. People would think that's an easy decision to make. It's actually one of the hardest I've ever had to make. Like, as an 18-year-old, you can go to any school in the world that you want to based upon your talent and your ability. How do you narrow it down, right? So, typically most human beings would see like, okay, players like me or people like me, let's see what other people like me, decisions they made. So that's what I kind of did. A lot of the players that were like me went to Kentucky or Kansas or North Carolina. That was the typical algorithm within a top 5 player, top 5 prospect in the world. So I made a decision that at 18 that if I was going to use my platform, I was going to be in control. So instead, I went to UC Berkeley and explored my educational career versus going to what the algorithm would have preferred me to do.
So as Jaylen Brown alluded to, a lot of the campaigns being ran by bots to make people think a certain narrative is what the masses are thinking. We're seeing the same campaign be ran on him when it comes to his relationship with the Boston Celtics this offseason. He's coming off of one of the greatest seasons he's ever had, averaging 28 points per game, almost 7 rebounds and 5 assists. And it's amazing the level of rumors that has his name attached to it, when we really never seen if Jason Tatum is going to be the same guy that he was pre-injury. Check out Bill Simmons right here as he tosses Jaylen Brown's name for Giannis, as if the Greek freak is still in his prime and didn't have a ton of lower body surgeries.
But I think if the Celtics trade Jaylen, I don't think it's going to be for Giannis. I think it's going to be a trade like this. Multiple pieces, more flexibility, guys that would lead to one extra move after this. And I think that's what they're thinking.
Wow. Bill Simmons, a diehard Celtics fan, is talking about Jaylen Brown as if he's some sort of B-level star. But right here, we're going to get some great insight from former NBA champion with the Dallas Mavericks, Brendan Haywood, as he sat down with another NBA media personality, Rick Buford, and he gives us insight on a lot of the noise that he's hearing from his NBA circles surrounding the Boston Celtics' feelings on Jaylen Brown. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
So teams are fearful of sitting down and just being flat out honest. And what they're going to need to do is have a come to Jesus moment, because if the Boston Celtics let this just try to simmer and go away on its own, it's not going to work. I guarantee you it ain't going to work, because Jaylen Brown already feel like, a matter of fact, I'm going to give you something. I know some people in Boston that really didn't believe that Jaylen Brown could carry that team this year. And Jaylen Brown can sense it and feel it.
Shit, we could all feel it. You could tell from that transaction they made at the end of the season that they're not feeling it. Again, the question that's the elephant in the room is that if we all had to bet whatever we had in our bank accounts on Jason Tatum being in the same exact position Jaylen Brown was, 100% healthy and leading that same team to the 50-plus game win season, is that a guarantee Tatum could have did the same thing? Would any of us be comfortable making that bet that Tatum would do the same thing? And remember, Derek White wasn't the same player. He definitely took a step back this season.
And that's why he kind of said what he said. Like, yeah, there were people in my own franchise that didn't believe that what we did this year with me as the guy could happen. So now that it's happened, and after you've been an MVP, after you've helped win a championship, after you've led a team that was supposed to be a lottery team to a top-tier playoff spot, the thanks you get is, yeah, get out of here. We want another player.
Hey, also the thanks he got is what exactly he referred to in his live stream. The fact that they went with a completely different game plan that was geared more with Tatum being the lead. And it said a lot. Tatum is not 100% healthy. Also, it's too late in the season to begin to switch things up.
Yeah, there's going to have to be a moment of reckoning where Jaylen Brown, the front office, and the coaching staff all sit down and talk about how do we move past this. And Tatum needs to be there also.
But how can you, though? What can you say? And this is the thing. You're right. And it's always amazed me about the lack of communication or the fear of sitting down and having a face-to-face conversation. I can't tell you the number of times over the course of my career when a team knew that I was close to a guy, they would come to me to find out what they were thinking or how do we get this message to them. I'm like, he plays for you. But it always amazed me that organizations would be afraid to sit down and actually talk to a guy.
I mean, look at the way the Celtics handled the Ime Udoka situation. That shit was awkward as hell. You know, this goes back to Brad Stevens not being able to manage the personalities on that 2017 team. Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Tatum. You got the politics of Gordon Hayward, and of course, Kyrie. Sometimes that's a thing organizations overlook. Just the more direct communication on how someone's really feeling. It's a flaw that a lot of companies have, and we all see it because some of us have either worked or currently working for an organization that avoids conflict.
Face to face and say, here's the real. And I always thought, you know what? The player may not like it, but he will appreciate the fact that you came directly to them.
He'll respect.
And teams more teams than not will not do that. The problem that I have here is the damage is already done. Jaylen already demonstrated that he's more than what you thought he was. He was already having bad feelings, as you noted, because of the way everything went last year, and he defied what the team believed. And now Jason Tatum comes back, and it's like he didn't prove anything, at least not seemingly to the Celtics, in terms of how things were going to be organized. They're like, oh, Jason Tatum's back? Good. Oh, we can get Giannis for Jaylen? Okay, let's move on that. I mean, I don't know that you can reconcile that even if you sit down, short of saying, hey, look, we're going to try to do something. Just give us some time. Let's all try to work together for as long as we can, as long as we have to.
The Boston Celtics trying to trade Jaylen Brown for Giannis, in Jaylen's mind, is going to solidify all the rumors and the stuff that he was hearing about how certain people in the front office or within his Boston organization really don't believe in him or don't want him there, or maybe he rubs certain people the wrong way. I'm out the way in Charlotte, and I'm hearing that, so I know he's hearing it.
Wow, you fellas hear that? Let's listen to it one more time.
And the stuff that he was hearing about how certain people in the front office or within his Boston organization really don't believe in him or don't want him there, or maybe he rubs certain people the wrong way. I'm out the way in Charlotte, and I'm hearing that, so I know he's hearing it. I said this yesterday on my own social platform, and some people took it the wrong way. I know that Giannis is a better player than Jaylen Brown, but I don't know if this present version of Giannis is 2 to 3 first-round picks better than this present version of Jaylen Brown.
Facts. Oh my God, it doesn't make any sense. After all those lower body surgeries and Giannis having a pending Supermax contract on top of that, fuck out of here, man. Come on.
Most of the time, if you got a player that's 29, that's a all-NBA level defender, that's a finals MVP, if you got to mortgage your future to bring in a guy that's 31 with a bunch of calf strains, most GMs say, nah, we good. We'll keep what we have plus our draft picks. The fact that they were willing to move says a lot, and Jaylen Brown's going to feel it. And if the Boston Celtics are going to be what they want to be next year, they're going to have an open discussion about it.
Brendan Haywood said the quiet part out loud right there. Jaylen Brown should be reassessing his relationship with the Celtics. They kind of said a lot by just even entertaining that Giannis trade. So at this moment, we're at the part of the segment where we're going to hear from 2 established NBA media insiders. One with Chris Mannix, who used to be a beat reporter for the Celtics, and Rachel Nichols, who does have a vote when it comes to the regular season MVP awards. But they gave great insight into the expectations the Celtics had coming into the season, and also Jaylen Brown feeling disrespected during the playoffs when the organization pivoted more towards Tatum. Once again, as I promised, we're going to get into it. But you guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
I think the media likes Jaylen Brown, personally. The media voted him Conference Finals Player of the Year, MVP, and Finals MVP. That was the media. So, and he wasn't the automatic choice.
I think he's also all-interview team, too. Wasn't he
Yes,
one of those?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the media. I voted Jaylen 5th on my MVP ballot and 6th, second team.
Ooh, okay.
On my All-NBA
so you're
ballot.
the culprits.
No, I think those are for two different things, right? The way he powered the Celtics through the season, he was the emblem, certainly on the court, Missoula to the sideline, of this is no gap year. We're not quitting. Come get us. We're coming for you. Like, that goes into an MVP for me. The leadership, the value you have. All-NBA, when I consider All-NBA, it's kind of like who is the best player in the season? What are your stats? How did you impact sort of technically X's and O's? And I thought Cade Cunningham had a bigger hand there.
Ever since she voted for Russell Westbrook for MVP, I didn't think she was valid, but she has made a good case right here when it comes to Jaylen Brown. Cade Cunningham did have the better season, leading his team to the top of the Eastern Conference. And also the things she said about Jaylen Brown's leadership, that does not get mentioned enough. But as we continue here, they're going to elaborate on the lack of expectations the Celtics had coming into the season.
Jaylen Brown is, I think, the smartest player in the NBA. I really do. And he has such advanced ideas about issues that a lot of NBA players don't even spend time on. But it's a shame, and therefore it is a shame to me to see him fall into, oh, the media doesn't like me. The media actually really likes him, but sometimes people are better, and that's okay. Being upset that you are, I mean, I would bet that he was 6th. I know they don't do that for second team All-NBA, but I would bet being voted the 6th best player in the best league in the entire world, so basically being told you're the 6th best guy in the entire world at playing basketball.
Well, one thing he would have to look at is why Luka is up there. And of course, we all know Luka is the man. He does his thing offensively, but he did barely even play the 65 games. I believe he only had 64. And not only that, for the first All-NBA team, Jaylen Brown led his team to more wins with far less talent. Again, we got to look at the standards of just making these teams a little funny.
I'd just love to get away from that as a snub.
But I get where he's coming from in that, like, if you're 5th, you can say I was top 5. The ability to say top 5.
In one of those
MVP,
categories, I voted for him. But did you?
First team, yeah, I did both. I was
right.
5th.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Boston. I didn't even need to ask you that.
Look, we're prisoners of the moment in a sense, because there's a lot of negativity around Boston. They get beat in the first round. Jaylen goes off on some of these tangents on his streams, but they were the biggest surprise of the NBA season. Mm-hmm. They had one All-Star. It was Jaylen Brown.
Again.
They won 56 games. They were a better offensive team statistically this year than they were last year.
Yep.
And they incorporated like 6 new guys into their rotation.
And they kept making trades even at the end of the season just to pretty much save money with that Vooch pickup.
I think Jaylen Brown deserved at least first team credit for that, to me. Like, maybe, can you put him over Luka? Probably not. Wemby, of course not. Joe.
No, go back on that. For this season, you could put him over Luka. He had the better record. He played with far less talent while his team kept on just making moves to kind of rebuild. Also, defensively, his numbers are way, way ahead of Luka's. And again, we're hearing from 2 voters that get to participate on who gets these awards. And to get their perspectives, and not only some of the insight that we're going to get later on, this is where we're going to begin to tie the many parts of this segment all together.
Jokic, of course not. Shea, of course not. But, like, part of it with Cade was that he did miss a bunch of games towards the end of the season. Part of it for me with Cade is that he did have Jalen Duren, who was an all-star on that team as well. Mm-hmm. That team also had cohesion. They were, like, largely the same team that won 44 games a year ago. They were supposed to take another step. The Celtics were supposed to be awful. They were supposed to be a 40-ish win team, maybe less, kicking around in the back half of the playoff bracket.
The Celtics were supposed to be so bad, even you didn't believe in them.
I thought they'd be horrible. They started the season 0-3. I'm like, all right, tank time.
Yeah.
Let's go. We can go get AJ DeBanza. Bring AJ DeBanza back to Boston. they turned out to be a 56-win team and one of the best teams in the NBA. So
again, that's why I put him on my MVP ballot. And obviously, I know that the Celtics got to number 2, right? They got to number 2. It's been so long, I can't remember. But the Pistons were number 1. I think the entire season. Was it wire to wire?
I don't know if it was wire to wire. It was close. It was, they had a pretty big lead. They did hold on to it with Cade out of the lineup too. Like Cade missed the last few weeks.
But it was I split my vote. That's how close it was for me. But I see, ultimately, I was like, great. I see those as 2 different categories. The MVP is for different qualities than all NBA. And so therefore, I'm weighing different qualities these 2 guys had in a different way. When Jaylen said on one of these other streams, this was my favorite year of playing basketball.
Didn't love that. No, knew what he was saying because it's not the first time that he said it.
And also, he's been put in a position where he has to at least make it be known of his value. Earlier in this segment, we heard the many parts where Jaylen Brown's first interactions coming into the league with the Boston Celtics have been them trying to not only police his voice, but also not necessarily valuing him, coming off the bench and consistently having his name tossed out there in trade rumors as far back as the days when they try to go after Anthony Davis.
I was around the team a little bit, not as much anymore, but I was around the team a little bit, and he said kind of that same thing during the season. Like he loved exceeding expectations. I bet if you put a gun to Joe Mazzulla's head, he probably said the same thing. This was his favorite season. You saw that line he gave to Derek White, called him last summer and said, we're going to suck. Everybody, I love it. Everybody said we're going to suck. We're going to be great.
If you think that the most competitive person on earth, Joe Mazzulla, favorite season was not the season he won the title.
I don't know.
You are a high person.
I think you're wrong. I think Joe Mazzulla.
We'll ask him. You and I will ask him. We both talked to him a lot off camera.
Defying expectations in the way that they did.
I have never been a split up the Jays person. I always thought that conversation was dumb. The Celtics have 2 great players. Why would you want to only have 1 great player when you can have 2? The only way, to me, you trade Jaylen Brown is if Jaylen Brown asks for a trade.
I'd agree. I think there's no reason to trade a 29-year-old who just had the best season of his career, who's shown that he can win and be successful opposite Jason Tatum.
So is Jaylen Brown going to ask for a trade? One of the rumored places for Giannis is Boston.
No, I wouldn't do that in a million years. Not in a million billion years would I do that. Why would, look, Giannis, if this was 3 years ago, yes, in a New York minute. But Giannis has had so many soft tissue injuries over the last
I don't disagree.
few years.
I'm just saying that's one of the fake trades out there for Giannis.
Not in a million kajillion years would I do that. 2 years ago, you won the damn championship. This year, you won 56 games without your best player. You've got a big fat trade exception. You've got your first-round draft pick. You've got Jason Tatum having a full off season to muscle up that injured leg.
Hey, that's the part we still have to see. Is Tatum even going to return being the old Jason Tatum? And just to add one more thing to that crazy list Chris Mannix just made about making the trade for Giannis, we gotta factor in his pending Supermax contract.
And then you got this whole band of improved players coming back next year. Not in a million years. The Celtics right now, I don't care if the Knicks win the championship. When the regular season starts next year, you probably make Boston the favorite to win the East. Probably.
We'll see.
I'm just saying,
again, I'm not advocating for a Jaylen Brown trade.
Maybe it'll be the number 1 seed in the East at least.
I think that Jaylen Brown should retire as a Celtic. I absolutely do. But the only time that you would say, oh, they're not the strongest team coming back with him is if he doesn't want to be there. So that's the only thing. And as we see a cacophony of Giannis trade, rumors, and there was more over the weekend.
On this stream, Jaylen Brown also said, I want to be a Celtic for the next 10 years. Like he said it.
I agree.
So, if he says he wants to be there, he's locked in for the next 3 years. I wouldn't do an extension, I think, not just for Jaylen Brown. We had this conversation about when Embiid was getting his extension. I wouldn't give guys with 3 years left in their contracts extension. Do it with 1 year left in his contract, not 3. But I'd have him around. Jason Tatum is on a long-term contract. Derek White is still there. Peyton Pritchard has 2 years left on the deal of the century that he's on.
Derek
not
White,
a chance.
who I love as a player, needs to spend this entire summer shooting.
Rachel Nichols is right on time. That is one of the biggest elephants in the room that the media refuses to speak on. Jaylen Brown had one of his best seasons while his team kept on moving people around in order to restart. And at the same time, one of their core players, and Derek White, had a bad year. That's the tricky thing about the NBA. Guys, sometimes the way you come into the league is the way you're perceived going forward. And sometimes it's hard for fans and even NBA personnel to kind of change their opinion about what you've done. Look what Jalen Brunson's going through. Even after winning the NBA Finals, they're still questioning him. Also, the fact that Jaylen Brown didn't necessarily have some parts of his game as polished when he first came in, and the Celtics eventually regulating him to the bench with all the new acquisitions they made. Whatever Jaylen Brown was in that time period is exactly the way they kind of kept him at. And that's what he was making reference to when he said, oh, they had a certain vision for me, but I had a bigger vision for myself, etc., etc. So now Rachel Nichols and Chris Mannix do a follow-up in which they reveal a lot of the issues that were going on during the playoffs when the Celtics had switched their system right back with Tatum having full control, just coming off that injury. There's a disconnect between Jaylen Brown and the Celtics, and they're going to reveal it here. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
It was reported multiple places during the week the Celtics were all in on Giannis. Clearly they were not, because all in means you go all in, and they weren't willing to do that.
Right.
They're willing to part with Jaylen Brown. They're willing to part with a couple of first-round picks, but they weren't willing to go deep into their cache of young players. They weren't willing to go with swaps and future picks and all the things they could have done.
Which I think was smart, don't you?
Well, that's the question. Like, should they have gone all in and committed Hugo Gonzalez, committed Baylor Shireman, committed, a couple of pick swaps to this in order to get Giannis Antetokounmpo?
I mean, look, it's not, I think the misinterpretation, some people hear that and they're like, really? You lost out on Giannis because of Hugo Gonzalez? Like, come on, man, what are you doing? It's not necessarily just that. It's also about, it's hard to replace that depth. It's not necessarily this player is untouchable when Jaylen Brown isn't. But it's hard to replace that depth if you give everything away, including pick swaps and more draft assets. So I think when we just had this conversation, if you gut your team to get this big star player, you're not going to end up winning. And in Boston, this is the team with 18 championships. That is the bar. And so I wouldn't have gone, quote, all in the way that you're talking about. And not because I think Hugo Gonzalez is the greatest player on earth. I just think that the overall position it would have left the team in is what we were just talking about. But I do wonder now what they are going to do. I don't personally, and you're around the Celtics 100 times more than I am, I don't know if I buy the relationship with Jaylen Brown is now too tainted. First of all, will they or won't they trade Jaylen Brown has been a topic for the last 5 years, so he's used to it. I know the twitch and the this, and he's mad and whatever, but Boston for a long time when Danny Ainge was running things, it was Danny Ainge would trade his mother, right? That was that you give Danny Ainge enough, he would trade his mother. And the bottom line was, hey, everybody is dealable here if we think the team is going to be better. And that is the ethos. And if that is the ethos around the team, nobody can be, well, I should not be tradable. I should not be that in that category. And I think if you are smart enough as a front office, and I don't know if Brad Stevens has that Danny Ainge sort of reputation inside the team, I think you can be like, yeah, grow up. Don't be a baby. This is the business. We're paying you $300 million plus.
And that right there is really the crux, because Brad Stevens already proved when he coached that team back in 2017 with the personalities of Kyrie Irving, Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown coming off the bench, the politics of Gordon Hayward and his injury. He couldn't manage any of that. So are we really left to believe that some of that animosity Jaylen Brown has ever since he entered the Celtics building, that it's been managed up to this point? I don't know.
Come play with Jason Tatum, who you like. We'll make other, arrangements around the edges. I don't buy that the relationship is soured too much. You have to deal him for less than you could otherwise get for him. Do you?
Well, let me start with, I don't think that the Celtics should have gone all in for Giannis. I don't think they should have gutted the team because this is not 2022.
Yeah.
Giannis is right now damaged goods. He has had, as we mentioned, multiple years of these kind of soft tissue injuries, calf injuries that are enormous red flags for a player of his size and the way that he plays. And he's also not a player that has shown that he's evolving as he's getting older. This is the second part of it. Like, is the relationship irrevocably damaged? I do think it's more damaged than you think. I think
I buy it. You would know.
Now, as you hear it right there, Rachel Nichols says, hey, as you would know, because Chris Mannix does have inside information for the Celtics. I believe he used to be a beat writer for them. But right here, he's going to express some of the sentiments that he's been told that's coming out of that building.
You know, every year it's like death taxes at a Jaylen Brown trade rumor in Boston. It was Kawhi Leonard in 2018. It was Anthony Davis in 19 and 20. It was Kevin Durant in 2022. But this to me feels different. You know, in the early years, Jaylen Brown was just like this young kid that had proven nothing. Mm-hmm. In 2022, he had proven something. And I reported at the time that he was pretty pissed off at those trade talks. He was, I don't want to overcharacterize his emotions, but he was upset that after helping lead the team to the finals and coming 2 wins away from winning a championship, he's being dangled for a player that's older than him that hadn't accomplished, what he had as recently as he did in Kevin Durant. This is like that on steroids, right? Like this is Jaylen Brown coming off an all-NBA season, coming off a year where he finished 6th in MVP voting, coming off a year where he did lead this team to 56 wins. I mean, 56 wins for the Celtics this year. We focus on the ending, but 56 wins was remarkable. What they did this year was incredible. I think after all that, to again, not only hear his name in trade rumors, but to see his name out there as one of the finalists, as seeing it firmly in print that this was close to happening, I think that caused some pretty significant damage to this relationship. And look, Brad Stevens, I was up late last night watching his press conference after the draft. There were multiple times Brad Stevens could have put the kibosh on, Jaylen Brown isn't going anywhere. Could have put some punctuation on it. He did everything he possibly could to not be definitive on that. He said Jaylen Brown is incredibly valuable, but I can't predict the future. He said Jaylen Brown is part of who we are, but he said you never know what can happen. Like he was purposefully vague with Jaylen Brown. So that tells me this was not just about acquiring Giannis or just about a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, which it was about in 2022. In 2022, It was about acquiring Kevin Durant. This time around, they missed out on Giannis. There's a decent chance they turn around in the next few days and weeks and do a deal for somebody else. So I do think the damage is much more significant now than it was years ago.
Now, a follow-up question the media could ask Brad Stevens after making those statements is if Jason Tatum is also on that list, because it's not a guarantee that he comes back off of that injury looking the same.
But he is, if not the one of the smartest players in the league. And this is a situation where the Celtics weren't saying Giannis is better than Jaylen Brown. They were saying Giannis fits the needs we have on this team better than Jaylen Brown does. You're having elite player and elite player because Giannis, yes, he obviously has more of a track record. Jaylen being 6th in MVP voting is no comparison to Giannis on that score. But the need for Giannis, the need for somebody who can pair with Jason Tatum in that way, who can be that big. I just think that Jaylen understands, even if maybe the hurt takes over, and maybe that's the more important thing, that they were trading. It wasn't them saying, Jaylen Brown, you're not good enough, because that idea of like, well, what else do you want me to do for you? I don't think it was a case of, well, you didn't do enough. I just don't think that was what Boston was thinking here. I think they were thinking, clearly that playoff series exposed. It was more than just Jason Tatum, was hurt by the end of it. Clearly, they need to change some big things about their team, which, by the way, they knew they were going to have to do. They didn't expect to be in this situation to begin with, so they knew this was going to be a retool.
But also, Jaylen Brown might have been thinking that the Giannis and Jason Tatum pairing doesn't even make any sense because low-key Giannis loves to operate with the ball in his hands. And we've seen that clash play out with him and Damian Lillard in that short stint up in Milwaukee. Again, the optics still doesn't look right. You're about to gut half your team just for a player in Giannis who might not necessarily make a nice 1-2 punch with Tatum.
I don't know, man. I think that it would be a mistake for the Celtics to make a deal for someone who I put 5th on my MVP ballot for less than he's worth because of bad feelings. I just think you got to work those out. Get in a room. I don't know if Boston has a sports psychologist. Get in a room with Brad and the sports psychologist and Jaylen and talk it out, man. Address it head on. But they could still deal him. I absolutely believe they could, and they might want to or have to, again, to fill a need on their team. But I just don't think, quote, bad feelings should be the reason they give away who I think is one of the most valuable assets in the NBA right now.
And Jaylen Brown is indeed valuable, but the Celtics at some point, just like how the Knicks took a stand, stood by Karl-Anthony Towns and letting it be known that the Giannis talks are over. Brad Stevens is going to have to do something similar because the math doesn't quite add up, especially with today's version of Giannis. You got to pay him an additional Supermax contract. We're talking about a star that's about to enter his mid-30s with a bunch of lower body surgeries. The optics are still a stretch, so why entertain it and not stand by your player? But it is what it is. There's definitely multiple layers to this whole Jaylen Brown situation, him being a little bit too boisterous and opinionated. And the NBA right now is at a point where they're trying to be that global league to appeal to the masses. And players taking stands on certain issues is not necessarily going to fit with that image. We can't ignore the marketability of some of these players. And depending on who, some might get a push by the league. In certain circumstances, Jaylen Brown's going to realize that when you do take a stance, it's going to come with a lot of arrows and sacrifice. You're going to lose a lot. We always hear Muhammad Ali's name being tossed out there, but he has lost a lot, especially financially. The shadow banning and low-key blackball out of certain situations like sponsorships, not being on Team USA after winning the NBA Finals MVP. These things are going to happen, and unfortunately, he's going to have to take everything that it comes with. We're in a landscape today where the audience has been conditioned to view the players actually getting to the money way more than their character. And this is why you're not necessarily going to see a Muhammad Ali or even a player like Charles Barkley who used to actually voice his real opinions. That's going to be very far in between. So former center and NBA champion Brendan Haywood confirms what Kevin Garnett had initially stated about Victor Wembanyama and Tim Duncan not necessarily being on the same page. Wemby is coming off NBA Finals in which the Knicks kept on coming back and they were not able to close out games, especially with Victor not being able to establish himself in the post. There is an off-season pivot where he's going to have to meet with some of the masters, guys like Hakeem Olajuwon, and within his franchise themselves, David Robinson and Tim Duncan, and just refine his post game. But we're going to get into it. Let's first start off with Brendan Haywood confirming what Kevin Garnett said, and then we'll go back to that original statement made by KG. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
You sometimes, if you're not that coach, you got to have that coach. And I work with Sam Mitchell for years. Sam Mitchell don't hold his tongue. That's why I think he'd be perfect. He'd be the guy that says, hey, Wemby, man, get your big behind in the lane, man. Yep. And if Wemby didn't like it, he'd just be looking, because Sam's not scared to get fired. You got to have a guy that's got, like, listen, that's going to tell you the tough stuff when you might not want to hear it. Because if everybody's sitting over there just trying to protect their job, you're not going to win. You got to have somebody that's willing to be the bad guy. Do the Spurs have that? Do the Spurs have somebody that's willing to tell Wemby, you need to work with Tim Duncan? Because I'm just going to, from what I heard, Wemby wasn't always receptive to some of the stuff that Tim Duncan was trying to tell him. So, like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, hey, man, like, do you have the guy that's willing to say the tough stuff to De'Aaron Fox, the tough stuff to Wemby, especially at some of the most highest leverage moments?
You know, as Wemby begins to establish himself in the NBA player hierarchy, us as NBA spectators are going to have to take a step back and just review his player archetype, because this is a strong possibility that Wemby might be a 7-foot jump shooter. It's one thing to be a big, but it's another thing to have the characteristics and play like one. And when you look back at his first NBA Finals appearance, it makes sense why the Spurs announcers during the introductions to the lineups stated that he was a forward.
And the 7'4" forward from France, #1, Victor Wembanyama.
But getting back to him not necessarily being on the same page as Tim Duncan, let's go back to Kevin Garnett's initial statement, because this truly went under the radar, and he even went as far as to saying that David Robinson, the other Spurs legend that was a big, is pretty much outdated.
Get with the young fella, Big Wemby, this summer. What was that like? What did y'all do?
We didn't do anything. We had he wanted an exchange, and it was more like some intro shit, you know what I'm saying?
Just high and by?
Yeah. No, not just high and by, but he's on a journey to seek knowledge. He don't want to be in that box of the French player, blah blah blah. He's trying to break that whole narrative. I don't even think it's about where you from no more. It's about what type of bag you got. He's changing the way we look at the 5 position. He's changing how we're looking at the post position. Victor is bringing a different level of guard / small forward to the big man position. You know what I'm saying? Like if you think about it, he's mixing finesse and force at the same time, or trying to.
All he got to do is get stronger because he got all the game. Now, if you add strength, like we saw with Giannis, once Giannis got stronger, look what he turned into.
No, man.
You know what I'm saying? That's all he. But he got the knowledge. He getting the knowledge. I mean, look at the system from the Popovich.
Pop ain't around. Pop is not around. Pop at home resting.
His presence. He gave him that though.
No, man.
Gave him
Pop
that.
Ain't teaching like he was. Timmy came in there 4 years
Then you
already,
got Timmy
university
there.
ready. Timmy ain't in there. They don't even get along. They ain't even working. That joint don't even come together. David Robinson is outdated. Ain't no Grace in there teaching him. So he got to come to the wax. Everybody when they want, hey man, they didn't come here for the soft. You know what they came for? They came to me for the base. You hear me?
For the base.
That's what he wants. He wants mentality. How do I get stronger? How do I get better? And then when I'm out there, what am I doing? Yeah. So look, this is what I'm thinking, Victor.
Garnett is one hell of a character, but it's funny because his player archetype is kind of, I don't want to say similar to Wemby, but if you look at the way he came into the league, they listed Garnett as a small forward. And eventually we seen him dominate in the post while still adding elements of being a small forward. Again, it's interesting he mentioned David Robinson being out of date. Today's league is so different. David Robinson comes from that era where he took pay cuts to stay in San Antonio. Guys made certain sacrifices for the organization because David Robinson, he has like that military mindset. You know, it's all about the shield, and the NBA business today, it doesn't really work like that. Guys like Wemby are walking around almost like their own personal brands. So David Robinson being out of date, not used to social media, and just the understanding of the way players have to maneuver today. And it's unfortunate, but hopefully it could be corrected because there's a lot of things that Tim Duncan can help Wemby with in the post, or maybe a trip to go see Hakeem Olajuwon might be needed. But we'll see. Wemby is sort of ahead of schedule, and just going from a jump shooting big to a player who could establish himself on the post, it might be something new that us fans have never really seen before if there's some sort of 50-50 blend. That's what KG was making reference to earlier, and what Wemby's mindset and some of the information that he's trying to obtain to kind of tweak his own formula. But again, we'll see. Wemby's at that point where he's trying to find how to control these games with the pace, the overall tempo, and just sort of dictate which way it's going to go, especially in the playoffs. That's where referees kind of tuck in their whistles. The analytics doesn't work as well because players, they perform different under the pressure. When the lights are bright on the highest levels, that's where any lack of just discipline on the smallest details are going to show. But you guys definitely hit up the links in the description below. Check out my NBA True Story playlist for more segments like this. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.